Welcome to today's episode of the Sub Hub. Danny, how are you feeling? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I had my first official, in quotes, maybe the quotes are off now, official day of training yesterday where, I woke up, looked at Final Surge, had something assigned to me by Coach Terry. And yeah, it came with like a bunch of emotions. And then I went for a run and I was like, wow, this definitely feels like the start because it's hard again, which I'm sure you experience as well. But I kind of enjoy that. Like I kind of feel I like feeling humbled again by realizing how hard the sport is, maybe. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. And like feeling like you have a journey to go on at all. You're not just like trudging along in the same little groove all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I think post Mammoth, well, post OCC, then post Mammoth, I was kind of just feeling too not excited about training. And I think now the challenge has re-represented itself in the flavor that it'll come in for the season. And so I feel that it being hard is actually exciting to me.
Yeah. I think you've got to have that to make the easy times. Well, it's never easy,
I
really, if
know.
we're
I
being
was like, but
honest.
it's not easy. Like it never gets easy.
Things get smoother, but they continue to be hard.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And MK and I were chatting offline, but whenever I take a break, and it sounds like when she takes a break too, suddenly my body actually feels like it's catching up and tells me how much my body's being put through all the time. So I'm just excited for movement again and to feel kind of more oiled up day to day.
Yeah. No, I feel that. Yeah. I recently dropped out of CIM, as Danny knows. I'm sure a lot of other people know as well, because I was struggling with like a lot of tightness in my Achilles. And literally the moment I stopped road running, that went away. But now I'm like taking a break. And yeah, same thing. I just feel like so stiff, and hiking is really nice, but it doesn't seem to like, it's not as fluid for the movement that my body wants right now. But it's good to take a break.
Oh, totally. I walked so much during my break and I felt more sore from walking almost because
Yeah.
I don't know, you're just quite not moving in the same way. How do you feel emotionally dropping out of CIM?
I was a little bummed about it for a couple days, but I like had pretty up and down training for like 2 weeks. So at the beginning of that 2 weeks, I was like, man, I really suck. Like I'm so mad about how this is going, and like things just don't feel good. And then after a week of not being able to really train the way that I wanted to, then it became like I don't actually really care if this gets better because I don't want to do this now. Like I don't know. I had this like momentum coming out of the season where I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go do CIM. And then once training kind of like faltered a bit, the motivation wasn't quite there. So when Rick and I finally called it, it was just like, okay, we're moving on to the next season. That actually feels good. I had my time to like be upset while I was still trying to figure out if I could train. And now I'm just like, what are we gonna do in 2024?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's especially with our sport, I feel that August, September is kind of more of our season end,
Yeah.
mentally and emotionally. And I think, especially, I found being in North America and having the curiosity and drive to want to compete in Europe, it's like you've been traveling for 4 to 5 months at that point. And so then to come home and to, potentially have another race on your calendar, I think it really depends on when you started your season. Like there's
Yeah.
some people like Bailey Kowalczyk, who started a little bit later due to some, stuff going on, but now she's hella fresh. And so she's just like cranking out races. Whereas someone more like yourself, I mean, you've been going since February when you were, I mean, even before that.
January was
Yeah.
my first race. Yeah, January I ran Houston half, and I started training for that in like October of last year.
Yeah.
So it's just like my body was done. And also I think that so for Houston half, I gave myself basically like 3 months to train, like to transition from the roads to the trails. And for that first month, I just did like a lot of 200s, and that was really the extent of my intensity on the road. Whereas like this time around, I was like, oh, I can definitely do this in 8 weeks. But I think that because it was only 8 weeks and I had to go into long intensity so quickly, my body just was like, that's a hard no.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I feel like for you too, like you weren't just going to run a marathon, like the goal was to get an OTQ. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want to be hitting those times if
I
possible.
wanted to be going big,
Yeah.
but that's all right. I feel pretty good about that decision. That's the first time I've like, I think that's the first time I've dropped from a race ahead of time. Like usually I would just be like, okay, I'm just going to grit this out. But I just like didn't want to.
Yeah. Well, that's a good muscle to flex here and there for
Yeah.
sure. I don't think it's great when athletes are dropping out of races all the time because then that tends to make me think that something else is going on. But being able to have the foresight that you can if you need to, I think is valuable for sure.
Yeah. I agree. So today, on today's episode, we got to chat with Rachel Drake, which was a ton of fun. If you guys don't know Rachel Drake, we're very excited for you to get to know her in this episode. Danny, what were some of your highlights for our chat with Rachel?
Yeah. That was a perfect cue because Rachel is running CIM in
Mm-hmm.
December and she's going for the OTQ. So that's something I was excited to hear about, just why she enjoyed marathon training, how she thinks it translates to trail and vice versa. But the biggest thing was maybe a little bit more individual to myself and maybe MK2, which is really chatting and getting to know and learn about her journey through her pregnancy. So becoming pregnant, running through pregnancy. It sounds like she ran through pretty much the entire thing, and kind of the lessons learned. So we're really excited for you to listen to that part.
Yeah, I also really appreciated it. Kind of had to do with like her pregnancy and her comeback, but also just running in general. Her insight onto just like not comparing your journey to other people, and that like everybody has bad days. It's not always going to be rainbows and sunshine. And I feel like a lot of the times as professional athletes, we're really good at hiding those bad days because we have jobs that want us to, be on social media, and none of us really want to put that negative stuff out there. But sometimes you got to do it, and you got to let people know your journey. And I've really appreciated the way that Rachel has done that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I found personally when I put negative stuff on social media, like 20% of it is like, you shouldn't be so sad. Don't be so down. Why are you so emotional? I'll get those like private DMs where I'm like, no, I'm bummed out. But then 80% is like, thanks so much for sharing. This is very relatable. I totally get it and stuff. So yeah, Rachel definitely embodies that, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. So hopefully you guys enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy Rachel Drake.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the SubHub podcast. I'm MK Sullivan.
And I'm Danny Moreno. And today we have Rachel Drake, who is first and foremost a mom. She's also a medical student, but she also, and a big reason why she is here, she's a professional runner for Nike based in Portland, Oregon. She and her partner, Tyler Green, recently had a baby in September of 2022. With a 6th place finish at OCC this year, a top 10 finish at CCC in 2019, and a 2nd place finish overall in the Golden Trail World Series in 2020. Rachel is one of the US's best trail runners. Sorry, I said that kind of weird. But probably the most notable thing about Rachel is her infectious, loving, and joyful attitude that she brings to the sport. Welcome, Rachel.
Wow, thanks, Danny. That was a really sweet intro.
Oh, yeah. We're so happy to have you today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. This is going to be fun.
So for the listeners that don't know much about you, let's start a little bit with your background. So I guess just tell us how you got into trail running to start with.
Yeah, so I ran track and cross country in college at the University of Minnesota and honestly got pretty burnt out from it. So I took probably about a year off from that when I started medical school out in Portland, and then slowly just started discovering the trails in and around Portland. I met people on the trails that encouraged me to sign up for races. So I signed up for my first 50K. I think that was in 2015. And then actually met Tyler, my husband, at that race. And as anyone who's ever done a trail race knows, it's the best community out there, and just slowly started snowballing friends and got encouraged to do more and more races. And it's been history from there.
That's pretty cool. I'm pretty sure Abby and Cordis met at her first trail race too,
I
right?
didn't know that.
I think you're
Yeah.
right.
That's so wild. When you first met him, were you guys both racing, or was he volunteering or something?
Yeah, we were both racing. I remember I finished and he was like walking around in jean shorts and chacos, and I was like, who is this stud muffin? And then everyone was swimming in the Mackenzie River after the race, and he offered me some Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap, which if you've ever used it, it's in one word, invigorating, like a little too invigorating. It burned my skin. But yeah,
That's
that's
amazing. Yeah, I've used that soap before, and invigorating is a very positive uh,
Review.
description of it. Yeah. I've used, because it says on the bottle normally like this is for your hair, body, and face, like whatever, And so I bought like a travel size and used it on my face, and it just, I don't know,
Yeah.
terrible. Never doing that again.
yeah.
Dang, that's really cool. So, did you guys immediately start dating after that, or talking?
He messaged me on Facebook, and we realized that we lived kind of near each other back in Portland, and he said something like, I mistakenly left it to chance that we would run into each other. Like, let's go for a run, let's hang out, whatever. So we went on a couple runs, went on like one dinner date where we were both just totally out of our element. We went to this fancy restaurant where we were both like, I didn't want to buy anything because I mean we were both just poor and didn't want to spend things. We were both kind of stressed and like not ourselves. Like it was a big ice cube with stuff in the ice cube kind of place. But actually he was like, he called me a few weeks later and he was like, hey, I think you're really cool, but I just wanted to let you know I don't see this going anywhere romantically. And I was like, well, rejection never feels good. But at the same time, I was really grateful for that, because then I didn't have to worry about like, oh, is this on? Is this off? What's going on? I don't have to worry about it. So we actually became pretty good friends for like a year and a half. And then after that, he actually came back to me and he was like, hey, I messed up. You're awesome. And I was like, meh. I mean, I feel like I should have let him sweat a little more when I decided to go back to him, but I pretty much immediately was like, okay, like, you're cool. You would be a
I'm
good.
into it.
I guess I'm into it.
That's so cute. I love that you guys were like just BFFs for a long time before you were still BFFs, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. He's definitely
I just love how there was stuff in the ice too. That's like such a fancy
You know
restaurant.
what I mean? It was like there's like an orange peel in the ice. And then there's also like some sort of print on the ice too. It was just like, I mean,
I feel like everybody in their like mid 20s has that moment where they're like, let's go to this restaurant. And then you go there and you're like, oh my God, we do not have enough money to be here. Let's get some breadsticks and leave.
yeah, that was it. Imagine like being on a first date in that situation too.
Yeah. I have not run into that.
That's so cool. I didn't realize that you guys, yeah, dated, or I don't know if you would even call it date. You got to know each other, and
Yeah.
then you decided to be friends. He came back as he should have, and you guys ended up dating, and then eventually getting married. At what point during that friendship, kind of transitioning to romantic relationship, did your guys' interest in trail running increase? Because at that point, you had only done one trail race, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So we did the Mackenzie River 50K, and then I don't even remember what time of year that was, but maybe like the next year we went down to the North Face 50 miler. We drove down to it together. So I mean, our friendship was based around running. We would just run together socially. And it was actually really nice because I at that point didn't see him as anything other than a friend. So I was never like, oh, I need to look cute for this run. I was just totally, myself. So it was nice that when he came back, I was like, oh, so he's actually seen like, not the most glamorous parts of me and he still thinks I'm cool. So that was nice. Yeah.
He's seen the bathroom breaks on the side of a trail in the middle of a long run.
He's actually, well, since we've been married, he's in the middle of a race and in the middle of an FKT attempt, he's buried my poop for me.
Wow, that's love.
Yeah, truly.
Oh man. So when did you decide that trail running was something that you wanted to pursue like on a professional level?
Yeah, I think I was in grad school and there was an older girl in the program. Her name's Simon Kirsch. She got really into triathlon and actually competed for Team USA in the Netherlands. And like meeting her, knowing her story, and then also Megan Roche, just knowing that she was able to be a professional runner while in medical school, at least showed me that it was possible. And then being with Tyler, he sort of gently encouraged me to be a little bit more selective about the races I was doing because I was mostly just doing a lot of local 50Ks and not necessarily putting myself out to any more competitive races. So I told him that I wanted to qualify for a USA team, and I had applied a couple of years for those at-large positions. And he was like, why don't you just go to Moab and go for one of the automatic qualifying positions? So I think just having someone that encouraged me and also made me believe in myself that I could qualify for one of those teams and compete with other amazing women.
Yeah, and I remember that race too. I can't remember. Did you end up getting the course record that year too?
I
Yeah.
don't know. Megan Kimmel might have had it. I don't remember what my time was or what her time was, but I think I did run a pretty fast time there.
Yeah, it was either that you had beaten it or gotten really close, and it was if it was close, though I think it was the former, it was the closest anyone had gotten in a while. And Megan Kimmel was kind of like our it girl for many of
Yeah.
years. She's super badass. Should be Hall of Fame, sub ultra women for US.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was really cool. How did it feel because then you won a national championship too?
Yeah. I think unfortunately in trail running national championships, and we were talking to Tabor Hemming about this, like people don't seem to care that much about USA's, which is really a shame because it is something that people outside the sport can understand. A lot of times they don't understand, a podium finish at UTMB, but they can understand, oh wow, you're a national champion. That sounds really cool. So in that sense, it did feel good. I think when I stepped on the line that day, there were a lot of names that I knew on the start line. So I was definitely feeling intimidated, just looking at who was in the race. But Tyler told me before, he's like, hey, don't stress if you're like out front and feeling good. Like you belong there. It's okay if you're leading the race. And it's also okay if you're not leading the race. Just like run intuitively and stay true to yourself. And fortunately on that day, it ended up going really well and was able to accomplish the goal.
Yeah, that is really interesting because MK and I just had Clementine on and we chatted briefly about the French national championships. And even for other countries, it seems the communities, it's a much bigger deal for them
Mhm.
when they win those national championships. And yeah, hasn't quite.
I wonder if part of that is just like having one championship that qualifies you for worlds instead of having like a championship as well as this other race that you could also qualify at, and then it dilutes everything. Whereas
Yeah.
like they're the only way you qualify for their national team is if you run nationals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. It's kind of like all in one. Um, well, regardless, that was a great result. And so that takes you into, I believe, 2019, right?
Yep.
And so is this kind of the first year where you're formulating more of a calendar? Because that qualified you for Patagonia? Is that what that
Yep.
qualified? Well, that's crazy. That's almost a year in advance.
Oh, yeah. I know. It's crazy. And I think trying to remember if it was wait, we were in Patagonia together.
Yeah.
It's just weird how that happens because sometimes people lose interest a year later or the
Or get
team
hurt.
is or get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that brought us into 2019. 2019 was a really good year. Tyler and I got married, and then I think a week after we got married, we signed with Nike. And then a week after that, I ran Grandma's Marathon on the roads to qualify for the Olympic trials. And then I think the week after that was Western States. for Tyler. So it was just a really busy June. But also I think that was the year I ran a bunch of races, not necessarily focusing on like, okay, this is my A race. But like, I think I ran the Peterson Ridge Rumble, and then I was in Paris for a conference in grad school, and I just Googled trail race in March in France, and this Mont Ventoux race came up, which I thought was just going to be like a local French race. And it turns out, according to Dylan, it's like the way too cool of France. So Blondine was in that race. Sarah VU was in that race, but I didn't know any of them. And Blondine caught up to me with like 2 miles to go. And she was like, hey, do you wanna finish together? And I was like, I mean, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna run my pace. If you want to finish together, we can, but I'm just gonna run my pace. And I just like hammered it, and I was able to hold her off. But I just think such a funny story, because she's an amazing competitor and athlete and woman. And so I just think it's funny, like that was kind of at the start of both of our I guess professional careers, and she ended up winning worlds that like a few months later and shocked everyone. Yeah.
That's so crazy. I love that story.
That's
Oh
well.
man. And then that was the year that you did really well at Golden Trail as well, isn't it?
It's the
Or was that
following year.
2020? Oh, that
That
was
was
2020.
next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the year I ran CCC, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious how it felt. Like you said, you didn't really have an A race. And so, going into CCC, did you realize how big of a race that was? Obviously, you already had tremendous results prior to August.
Yeah, I guess I kind of misspoke. I did really want to focus on CCC, but I didn't want that to be my only thing that I was doing. So I guess more in the spring, I was doing all these process races leading up to the road marathon I guess in mid-June. I was pretty focused on marathon training, and then really just had like 2 months to get ready for CCC. And at that point I was focused on doing a lot of vert and getting ready for that. But it was interesting how quickly I feel like the marathon fitness was able to shift into mountain woman fitness, and like to get the climbing and descending legs, which is another part of the reason why I wanted to do another marathon training block, which is what I'm doing right now, because I think it translates really nicely into trails.
Yeah. No, I think I have a really hard time. It's very easy to switch from road training to trail training. It's switching from trail to road that is like, it doesn't translate quite as well. You got to take the time to like really, the turnover, just like the tendons and stuff that you're not like stressing in the same way. It's a wild world out there. But so you do CCC in 2019, but then you go and focus on like much shorter races the year after that. What was the reasoning for that? Or did it just kind of happen because of the way that COVID set everything up?
It was totally pandemic driven. I mean, there weren't really any races going on at all. So, just did a couple FKTs in 2020. Well, I guess we had the Olympic trials in February, and then everything shut down after that. And Tyler and I just got into this great rhythm of running and sort of working and training, like doing lots of strength work, core work, eating well. And I feel like the reason that I went into to do the Golden Trail series stage race that year is just because that was really the only thing that was available. But it was a blast. I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, I mean, a blast, and what an incredible performance you put together there. Rachel ended up getting second overall behind Maud, and she also won the last day of the stage race, which they've only done the stage race twice, once in 2020, the other being last year in 2022. And also similarly, if I remember correctly, she also asked if you guys could finish together. So I think it's just your friendliness, Rachel. Everyone just wants to finish with you.
Did she? I don't think she.
Oh, I thought you
No,
mentioned that to me at some
no,
point.
this was really cool. So it was like a big climb and then a big descent, or climb, flat, descent. And she passed me on the climb, and I just, kept doing the best that I could. And eventually I caught back up with her on the descent. And as I passed her, she was like, "Yeah, Rachel, way to go." And I was like, "Man, that's really cool." Like, how many sports would you see that in, where your like your biggest competitor is like proud of you for passing them?
Yeah. I feel like that's trail running in a nutshell.
Mhm.
That was like I remember when you passed me at OCC, I had the thought like, all right, Rachel, let's go. I don't think I said it out loud because I was dying,
We had
but
a good little exchange. I don't remember
yeah.
what it was, but it was like a positive, like, couple steps of working together for sure.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of stories like that where it's like you pass somebody and they're like, you've got this, let's go. And you just like never, I would never have done that on the track or on the roads. Like,
Or if you try to, people are like, "What? Why are you talking?
please shut up.
Why are you talking right now?"
Yeah. It's a totally different world, but that's why we're all here.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. So then after 2020, that is a huge result. We're going into 2021. Don't worry, folks, we are going to get to the present. We just want to make sure that you have a full understanding of Rachel before we get to present day. So you go into 2021 and races still weren't happening quite yet for us. And then we both had the opportunity to go to Europe pretty much the first day you could get into Europe
Yeah.
after the pandemic, which was Olagenaria, and you kicked ass there. Ended up sixth at that race, which had all the greats, Maud, Judith, Blondine, the list goes on. And then kind of talk us through like what happened through the rest of that year.
Yeah. I was actually kind of disappointed with that race. I mean, it was really competitive, but I feel like with the whole no aid station debacle, I had like had some mental weakness, but we don't need to talk about that. What I'm trying to think what else I did 2021. So actually I defended my PhD in, I think it was April or maybe May of 2021. And then I went back to med school. So things got a little bit more busy, kind of professionally. But I was able to run the Volcanic 50K, which is a classic Pacific Northwest race that goes around Mount St. Helens. And then I kind of put together a couple other random races. I did run OCC, but had a really subpar performance there. It was one of those examples of I'm going to do it all, and it really didn't go well. I flew in the day before the race from one of my college teammates and friends' funerals, and was just emotionally really, not doing super well. And then also physically from flying in the day before the race. I think I was like 21st that year. And then came home and got an itch to do some faster training. So I ran the Twin City 10-mile race in Minnesota that October. And then Tyler and I actually ran a 55K together at the end of October, the Coyote Wall 55K, which I highly recommend. Local race in Portland, and our good friend Sean Harriser is the race director for that. That was fun because we ran it the entire thing together. It was just like a great long run. And then I'm trying to think. Did I get pregnant? I think I got pregnant then. Oh, and then I met Tabor at the San Francisco
The Golden Gate Classic.
Golden Gate.
Yeah.
Classic. Yeah, we ripped a half marathon together there. And then I got pregnant, I think a couple weeks after that.
Yeah.
So since we're at pregnancy, should we take a pause on and not going to the present and kind of talk about pregnancy for a little bit, Danny?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing about her OCC experience, because I just think that's so important to continue to highlight to people is just we both have had experiences like that as well, MK and I, where you're pushing, you're trying to juggle all these balls. And one of those balls also is kind of like your emotional limit, and just how important it is that that ball almost needs to be nurtured the most to like keep everything in balance. And so it's like both a blessing and a hard day that you had OCC, but I think those days are also just really important to help like ground us and be like, okay, maybe I do take a step back. Like I remember you finished with a huge smile on your face, as you always do at that race. But yeah, just having experienced that as well, it's just like, well, okay, I'm human. And then I just need to try and remember that as much as I can going forward.
And to talk about it and highlight it, because I think, people aren't going to mention that in the introduction. And she was 21st in 2021 at the, she had a rough day because she was emotionally not well. I mean, we need to talk about that, right? Because we're all human and we need to take care of ourselves and take care of one another.
Yeah. And then there's definitely like this, especially with, social media obligations and stuff, where it's like, you feel like you gotta tough it out for the social media posts, and it's like, no, I had a shitty day. I had a shitty week. Just let me like have that. And so I felt Danny and I like did a whole, like the longest episode of our pod so far that was like just us being like, yeah, OCC sucked. And I thought it was like, we got, that was probably the most we heard back from people like on an episode.
Yeah, because we both were basically crying.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cathartic though, because I mean, everyone can relate to that. We've all been there. It's like the worst part is when you go through that and then you feel alone because you see on social media these examples of people, putting lipstick on their just really crappy experience.
Yeah, for sure. So for pregnancy purposes, when did you guys decide that you were going to get pregnant, and how did you decide that? Like, what factors did you guys consider being professional athletes, and also a med student?
Yeah. I think just hearing that question makes me feel like, oh my gosh, like it is a really big decision. So yes, there's a lot going on. And I think the biggest thing that we thought about is that we knew that we wanted to have kids at some point in our lives. Like when we, hopefully get to age 80, 90, and we look back on our lives, we're not going to think, oh, I wish I had run UTMB in 2022 or whatever it was. Like we knew that we wanted to have kids and we knew that we would have to sacrifice something. We also knew that our sponsors were all very supportive of pregnancy. So in terms of that side of things, I think that took a little bit of pressure off. And then also I knew that I didn't want to wait until I was desperate to get pregnant to start trying. So we got to the point where we thought, okay, it would be okay if we got pregnant now. Maybe it's not the ideal time. Yes, I'm in med school. Yes, I'm still like I was starting to think about training for the Chuckanut 50K because that was a race that I've always thought like, oh, I want to go there and like really train for it, make that an A race and just like see what I can do because it's such a historic race. So we started trying. Actually, one of my friends she was an OBGYN resident at the time. She took my IUD out. So that was kind of a sweet little moment for us. And then we got pregnant pretty quickly. And we actually found out the day before I was going down to Bend, Oregon for a surgery rotation, which was pretty overwhelming to realize, oh my gosh, we're pregnant and I'm going to go do a surgery rotation alone in Bend. But it ended up being really great. The people that I worked with down there were awesome. And then there's a lot of amazing trail runners in Bend that were just really good friends during that time. So spent a lot of time with Kimber and Sarah Bard and felt super lucky to have that support down there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if Kimber was still there at that point, so that's really cool.
Yeah,
that she was.
there.
Dang,
Yeah.
that has to feel I don't know what emotion would be put onto it, but I feel that a lot of times we are told as women athletes that even if you're younger and when you choose to get pregnant, it might be tougher because you've put your body, through so much. Did you, I don't know, did that cross your mind at any point? Like, this might be tough to do? I don't know. It's crossed my mind at some points, but I try and, check the boxes like, no, I get my period each month. I eat well, etc.
You're talking about getting pregnant.
Yeah, yeah. Just like as women athletes, like we tend to be told, at least that's something that I hear, that you've been putting your body through so much for so many years, like it's probably gonna be hard.
Yeah, I in college had some amenorrhea where I wasn't getting my period, and at the time I thought that was totally fine. So I definitely, as we decided to at least not, you know, stop not trying, throw caution to the wind. In my mind, I was like, I always kind of thought that it would take a long time for me to get pregnant because of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, so I bet it was a bit of a surprise when it pretty much worked out immediately.
Oh yeah, it was. And I think I was looking at my period tracker because I did get my period while I had my IUD, and I was like kind of just looking at it, not, and like the few times that it could have happened, I was like, oh, but I wasn't in the right phase or something. I was like, all it takes is one time.
Yeah.
My friend Louisa, who took the IUD out, she goes, Rach, you can get pregnant now. And I was like, yeah, but it'll take like
The stars have to align. There has to be a harvest moon and a light directly over my womb before I get pregnant. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's huge. So now you're in Bend by yourself with some friends. I'm just curious, like, obviously you're both excited, but Tyler also is your coach. And so I'm curious, like, what advice or guidelines, like how is training going to look like you through pregnancy? Look
Yeah,
like for you.
right. It was really just day by day, week by week changing. And I think, I asked my OBGYN, like, okay, so what can I do? Like, can I run this 50K at 12 weeks pregnant? Can I do high intensity running? And she said, you can maintain your pre-pregnancy level of activity, whatever that is. We don't recommend that people pick up running, intense running the moment they get pregnant. But if that's what you've been doing, that's what your body's used to, you can continue doing that as tolerated. Like, obviously, if you're feeling terrible doing it, back off. But I pretty much maintained or modified the current level of training. And then of course, as the pregnancy went on, I was like, okay, now I'm like needing to bring water with me on a 40-minute run. Now I'm needing to bring like 4 gels with me on an hour-long run. But just realizing that like things are changing quickly, and making sure that I'm taking care of myself and modifying things kind of day by day.
Yeah. So was this Tyler's first time coaching a pregnant woman?
Tyler, was it first when I was pregnant? He just walked into the room.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So were you the guinea pig?
I guess I was the guinea pig, but I think it was good because he's coached like moms before,
Yeah.
but never anyone that's been pregnant. And actually, then shortly after that, like 3 months into my pregnancy, my one of my best friends, Marianne, got pregnant, and he was coaching her at the time. So, yeah,
You're just 3 months ahead in the process.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. To me too, Tyler is such a student of the sport, not only for like as an athlete, but as a coach. So did he consume any materials during that time, I'm guessing?
He is always consuming materials, and that's a big reason why I wanted him to coach me, is because I just see him buying books, getting, like reading articles and just trying to learn everything he can about the sport. I don't know exactly what resources he found when he was trying to learn more about that, but I feel like he's always reading to try to, specifically for like problems that his athletes are having. Not that pregnancy is a problem, but like unique considerations, maybe I'll say.
Totally.
Yeah.
I know it's different for every woman that's pregnant, but for you, what were some main indicators that you were crossing kind of this threshold that training is now going to either stopped or be inhibited or changed completely?
I think it was when like my belly started getting pretty big, maybe I think it was maybe like around 30 weeks, maybe a little after, where like I started feeling like in my hips just like some instability there. I got a really great belly band that helped support my stomach or my uterus from above and below, and that really helped kind of hold Lewis in place. But we didn't know that he was Lewis at the time. But yeah, it was just like when things got uncomfortable from a musculoskeletal perspective. Like I think the shortness of breath and the slowness, that's all fine, because like I could do uphill hiking. I could, I could really do a lot, but it was like later on in my pregnancy when things started feeling like just, yeah, from a musculoskeletal perspective, a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine. There's so much pressure, especially for someone like a small, like a runner. That's so much pressure on your hips that you're definitely not used to.
Yeah.
And so after you stopped running, did you continue to like cross train, or was it just kind of one of those things where you're just like, we're just done until baby Lou is here?
So I didn't actually necessarily stop running. I just decreased the intensity and the duration a lot.
Okay.
Like I was kind of just waiting for him to be born. So I was going to the high school cross country practices, and I would do workouts with the JV runners, which was like my perfect pace. Like one of the girls and I think 2 days before Lewis was born, we were doing mile repeats at like 9-minute pace, and we were just like breathing really heavy. We got to the finish and we're like high-fiving, hands on the knees. I love telling that story because it was
That
just
is
like
so cool.
really fun. But it was more like if I tried to go longer than like 4 miles, that I started feeling that like breakdown. But I was grateful to be able to still run at least a couple miles, like pretty much up until the end.
Yeah. That's just so cool that you are working out with them so that they could also see, you being pregnant and getting after it. And that's what was comfortable with you. And like one of their moms might not do that. And that's what's comfortable for them. I remember my mom like would also go to soccer practice like almost until, the hour that my littlest brother was born. And it's permanently in my head, that she'd be out there like just tossing the balls, but getting out there, I'm like, oh, you can like do stuff, whatever you're comfortable with, right? Yeah, whatever you want to. A last kind of like training during pregnancy question before we cross the new threshold, which is Lou being born into the world. Did you do trails? Like that's something that I think about is downhill running all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. The downhill running really like didn't feel great. I did do trails. So I would do workouts with my friend Marianne, who was a little bit less pregnant than me. We were both pregnant. It would be just a lot of more smooth trails. Never like hammering downhill, but just because that didn't feel good. I mean, it's really just like everyone's body goes through pregnancy so differently. And I feel like the best thing you can do is just be really true to yourself and like listen to what feels good to you. And maybe for someone running downhill would feel fine, but like for me, it didn't. So, yeah, walking, like doing a lot of walking on trails too was nice. And sorry, MK, you asked about cross training too. I didn't really do much cross training. I think like I biked a couple of times for transportation, but I don't think I ever really ellipticaled or did stationary bike or anything like that while I was pregnant. Like I think I just preferred being outside and like in the forest. So I would probably just go for a walk.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm like that, pregnant or not, you know.
Yeah.
Today I was like, I could go bike for an hour and a half, or I could just like walk around in the woods. I think I'm gonna walk around in the woods today. But yeah, no, I think it's obviously very important to not compare yourself to other people's pregnancies. I haven't experienced it, but just everybody is so different. I mean, even in training, we're all different. None of us do the same things. So why would you do the same thing as somebody else who you also know who happened to be pregnant?
That's a great point. Like we do completely different training or very different training, and yet in races, a lot of times we're just a few minutes different. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good point.
So then Lou comes to the world in September. So he's like,
yay.
he's a year old now, right?
Yeah,
Oh, that's so exciting. Did you guys have a fun little 1 year birthday party?
did. It was awesome. I made a funfetti cake, and we got some balloons and had friends and family over, and it was great.
Did you do
I
the
love
cake
that.
smash with him? Did he do that thing?
Yeah, I made him a smash cake, like a healthy version of the funfetti cake that was made with like bananas and some kind of healthy flour. Um, he actually ate the whole thing, which was really cool. It was just like a little cupcake, but yeah,
Nice.
it's fun.
That's awesome. Sorry, go ahead, MK.
Oh,
Your
I was just
thoughts?
gonna say, so Lewis is born. It's very exciting. I imagine that you probably took some time off afterwards because you can't, well, maybe you can. You can't just like pop into training right away. So how long did it take you to get to a point where you felt comfortable starting training?
I think I took 6 to 8 weeks completely off. I started seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist maybe around 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. Um, and then I think I actually my first run that wasn't an official run was at the state cross country meet, just like cheering for the high schoolers. So I think it was about 6 weeks after he was born. I did a little shuffle and it felt okay.
Yeah, that makes sense because Lou was born kind of like late September, right, of
Mhm.
2022, and cross country normally ends around Thanksgiving. So that's awesome. Perfect timing. I'm sure all those kids loved to see you, especially the one you were fist pumping, doing mile repeats with
Yep.
weeks before. So once you get back to training, also quick question, is that the longest you've ever taken off from running?
I mean, after college, I think I definitely took at least a few months,
Okay.
if not like a full year. I might have gone for some jogs, but I wasn't tracking anything. I don't think I really ran that much.
Yeah.
So no, it wasn't the longest time that I took off. Maybe it was the longest time I took off, like where I kind of had to force myself to. But at the same time, I was like, I didn't feel the need to run because I had like this new little guy to get to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah. Even like when we talked to Steon, whenever that was this summer, he was talking about how he had originally planned to do CCC the year that his first kid was born. And he started the race, like the kid was born like maybe 2 weeks, a week before CCC.
Good.
And he started the race and he told us that he got like 10, 15 miles in and was just like, yeah, I miss my family. And like that was why he stopped. He was just like, I want to go back to my kid. This is not working.
Yeah. That's like the beautiful thing about running is I feel like it really takes all your armor off. Like you can convince yourself, yeah, I want to do this. Yeah, I'm tough. Yeah, I got this. But like you running will not let you hide from yourself and from the truth of like how you really feel about everything. So like sometimes it's beautiful and wonderful and you crush the race, but in other times it's beautiful and wonderful and you realize like what really matters to you in the middle of the race, and maybe that means you drop out and go back home to hang out with your family.
Yeah, 100%. It's like new baby, or like we mentioned previously, like someone close passing away. It brings out those very high or low moments. And I've ugly cried a lot of times, as I'm sure you guys have on ones.
Yep.
You're like,
More
I'm
than I'd
just,
like to admit.
yeah, more than a handful of times.
Yeah.
Cool. So you are returning back to training, and I'm curious, like, what surprised you most when you got back to training? That's
Um,
purposely generic question.
Honestly, like I was pretty shocked when I found out I had my stress fracture. I really thought that I was doing everything right. Like, I knew about the increased risk of stress fractures postpartum. I felt like, hey, I know all of this, and I'm working with a pelvic floor PT, and I'm doing my core work, I'm doing my strength, I'm doing everything. I'm eating well. I really thought that I was doing everything right, and like retrospectively I realize now that I was not, but I guess I was surprised by how wrong I was about my approach to postpartum running.
Yeah, I saw that recently you posted about breastfeeding and joint laxity. And so I'm curious if you could explain that to us and the listeners a little bit, as well as like, do you think that that may be why your bone injury occurred?
Probably contributed to it. I mean, there's so many changes that happen with pregnancy, both structurally that change your biomechanics, but then also more like at the molecular level. With breastfeeding, your bone density goes down, and then also the joint laxity would contribute to a change in biomechanics. So I've done pretty in-depth gait analysis. In the past, both pre and post pregnancy. And one of my deficiencies was enhanced post pregnancy, likely secondary to joint laxity, as well as weakened abdominal muscles and the many other biomechanical changes that occur with pregnancy. So I think my stress fracture was probably multifaceted, probably decreased bone density, too much running too soon. Another thing that happens in pregnancy is that your heart actually gets a lot stronger, because when you're pregnant, your blood volume expands by like 30%. So the workload on your heart is increased, which is great. It makes you feel like really strong cardiovascularly. However, your body, like the chassis of your car, is definitely weakened. So when you return to running postpartum, I'm not saying that you're going to feel amazing cardiovascularly, but at some point you might, and you might accidentally take that as a sign that, ooh, I'm ready to rip. I'm feeling good. I'm like nailing these workouts, but your body is still healing, and biomechanically you're probably not optimized. So you've got like this sports car engine in a crappy junker car. And that's kind of, I think, what happened to me, is like my body wasn't ready to handle what my heart could handle.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that about your heart.
Yeah, that's crazy. 30% is huge.
Yeah, I mean, you diurese it off like right after you give birth, but like the changes I think in your heart will persist. Like that strength, I guess, persists.
Yeah. So when you say you said you're doing core work, and there's something else that you said that you had been doing, other strength work, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like lifting weights and like PT kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so are you saying that you wouldn't do that again, or that you just would have layered other stuff in there as well?
I think I would have taken more time completely off. Like, why rush back to it? Like, I think I maybe would have started biking or something at 6 weeks, and then like start sprinkling in some running at 12 weeks or something, and then just ramp up the mileage more slowly. I got to 60 miles at like maybe 4 or 5 months postpartum, and that was just way too much. Like, it did not doing that, but I felt so good that I was like, oh, let's keep going, so I think just like when I do start back, just keeping the mileage super low, and yes, still doing the strength, like the weightlifting, and then still doing the core, but just doing way less miles.
Some more low impact work before you
Yeah.
get into the running.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's so interesting too, because like when we interviewed Judith, it could also be different in your next pregnancy, right? If you guys choose to have another kid, because like her first kid, she won a world championship, like what was it, like 3 months later?
Yeah, something like
And
that.
but then her second kid, it was a much longer, more difficult journey to get back. So yeah, that's super fascinating. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. It's different between people, but also in the same person. I mean, obviously I've only had one kid, but I've heard that like you can have, and I think Amanda Basham too, she said with her second that it just running during pregnancy felt terrible much earlier on. So yeah, you just never know what you're going to get.
The human body is wild. So did you ever like feel pressure, whether from, I mean, obviously you did if you came back as quickly as you did and then ended up getting hurt, but like what were the pressures that you felt to come back so quickly,
I
whether
mean,
from yourself or from the outside?
it was, I think, primarily from myself. We got a new team manager at Nike, like right as we had Lewis, and I had my first call with her. She's like, "Hey, I just want you to know, like, there is no pressure from me to race at all this year. Like, we want you to, if you want to, we'll support you in that, but like, no pressure. Like, do what you got to do, be with your family." So that was great. I didn't feel any pressure from any of my sponsors, actually. Another sponsor was like, "Hey, I just want you to know this only makes you more valuable as an athlete. Like, we love it. This is so cool that you're a mom." But I think pressure from within and a desire to want to get back to competing, and then also this false narrative that I've seen so much of, like, "Oh, you had a kid, like, mom strength, you're going to be better now. You're going to bounce back so fast." And I was like, "Oh, I want to show that I can do that. Like, I can bounce back. I'm going to get back in it. I'm going to work hard." I kind of liked the challenge of like, "Hey, let's get to know my new body and like see what it can do." Uh, but a lot of the pressure was really just from within.
Yeah. I feel like wherever we are in our journey, I feel that maybe the types of personalities that come with the sport, we're gonna always have some internal pressure, depending on what phase of life that you're going through. But I'm glad that now, you worked through the harder parts. Obviously, you're a mom now, so there's a fun journey ahead, regardless, as we all have our own journeys. But I'm glad that you're healthy now and that you're able to kind of work through that stress fracture and kind of harder beginning part, which I'm sure wasn't easy.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who has really, I mean, who's poured themselves into running has probably faced an injury at some point, and I don't wish that on anyone. It's just the worst.
Yeah. Well, before we transition kind of to like the last part, which will kind of be forward thinking, let's kind of wrap up this year. So you've had the injury, you worked through it, and then you came back and you jumped into Golden Trail, which I thought was so badass. To me, it was kind of just like, this is my interpretation, but it was kind of like middle fingers in the air, like, I don't care. I'm going to show up. I just want to race and be there. And I just thought that was so fearless and vulnerable to do. And so I'm just curious, was it that I'm perceiving?
Yeah, no, it was. I was like, I knew that I wasn't in amazing shape, but I was like, I really just want to like see my friends, get back in the game, and I will just kind of race my way back to fitness. And so, yeah, I did Dolomites in July, and like, it wasn't an amazing race, but at the same time it was an amazing race because I got to race. And Danny, you need to do that race. You would smash it. Oh my goodness. I want to do it again. It was super fun. Yeah, and then I feel like from that race I learned, like, okay, I want to, what did I wanted to work on climbing, because I thought climbing was always like a really good strength of mine, but I really struggled on the climb for some reason. So after that race, I was like, okay, let's focus on like really strong, sustained, like basically hiking for Sierra Zinal. So then I had Sierra Zinal maybe 3 weeks later, and I was like, whew, that climbing training really worked. I climbed super well and I felt really strong. But then when we got to the flat part on the top, I got smoked. Like people just were rolling past me. I had no turnover. Like MK was talking about trying to do road training off of mountain running. Like I felt like a monster truck like on a drag race. Like I just could not get that turnover. So after that I was like, okay, well I need to get some turnover before OCC. And so we focused on some more like fast running, and I feel like I was just like gathering pieces of information at the races about what my current weaknesses were, and then applying it to the next one. So it was actually a really fun way to process training and yeah, just test where I was at.
And then at OCC, you like knocked it out of the park. You ended up finishing 6th. And I'm curious, did you feel ready for that performance? Like, were you ready to have that day in your head, or did you finish and you're like, oh my gosh, like what just happened?
I mean, yeah, we were all there. That day was just crazy. It was so competitive. Just like looking at the start list, I was like, oh my goodness, like any one of these 10 people could win, and any one of these 30 people could be top 10. Like it was just um really competitive. So I think in terms of place, like if you had told me before the race, hey, you're going to be 6th, I would have been like, oh, that's awesome. And then on race day, like I had no idea where I was in the field. Like going up Bovine, the climb out of Champay Lock, I could see like Jen Lichter up ahead, and I was like, Jen, like I feel like she should be long gone by now. Like I don't know why I can even see her. And then I passed her on the descent, and I was like, this is weird. Like I mean, obviously we know now that she ended up having a rough day, but I got into Triant, and I asked one of our like Nike people, I was like, hey, what place am I in? And he's like, oh, you're in 6th. And I was like, sick. That's awesome. Cause I felt like I was trying to like run it a little more progressively. And so I was like, okay, cool. I don't feel like I'm redlining too much right now. So this is a good place to be in. Um, and then I was just kind of like going back and forth with a couple people up to the border between Switzerland and France. But yeah, no, it was a great day. Of course, like, you get to the finish and you're like, okay, how could I have like gotten on the podium now that I was 6th? But no, it was a good day.
Yeah, incredible day, honestly. I mean, like you said, that field was amazing. And I saw you guys going through Argentière. And so I saw Tony, who was out in front, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's having an incredible day right now. And then it was kind of Yao and Katie, which was, they were kind of coupled together. And then I was like waiting just a couple of minutes. And I almost started walking back to the car. I was like, I don't know. And then it was just a freight train of people. I was losing my mind. My voice was gone. I was just like, no. And I was trying to like chase you guys and yell, but my voice was cracking. But all of you guys were just so, eyes darting forward, just so in it. And I was like, oh, this is an effing race right here. This is the race right there.
Yeah.
Because at that point too, I was like, any of them could still get on the podium at this point, like that gap between 3rd and then 4 through 8 is pretty much what it was. I just
especially with that last climb, like that last climb is so brutal.
Pivotal. Yeah. I was running with Caitlin Fielder up that climb, and like I like to think that I helped slingshot her forward. She ended up picking off Daniela, but like it was super intense and just really fun to like be in a place where I'm like in the hunt for, towards the front.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, how crazy that was, right? Of course, with your previous OCC experience, a lot going on there. But then to go back this year, it looks like we're going to get maybe a little Lou in here in a second. And then to come back and get 6th in that field, it's just incredible. So congrats. Oh, hi, Lou.
Yeah, so thanks. It was super fun. And then what was really fun too is like the next day, then Tyler just had an amazing UTMB. So it was a really cool experience for the family.
Yeah, no,
definitely. That was an awesome weekend. And I imagine that it felt good to be able to support each other on the same weekend like that too.
Mm-hmm.
With Lulu.
Yeah, It was great because we made the commitment to go live over there for a few weeks leading up to the race. So it was just nice. It was nice that we were able to like capitalize on that. Yeah, it was fun for you too.
Now that you've experienced that, would you do that again with Lou?
Oh yeah. Yeah. If I could get the time, I would love to do that every year. Like
Was it?
I
Oh,
feel
sorry.
like
Go.
I feel like Europeans just like love kids. Like I would have my hands full on the bus and people would almost every time be like, "Oh, do you want me to take him?" and like hand him off to like some old French man on the bus. And I look over and he's like sharing his baguette with Lewis. Like no joke, that happened.
That is awesome. And was it just the two of you, or did you guys have help on race day or race weekend, or just Rachel's got him, or Tyler had him at OCC, you have him at UTMB?
Yeah, so my parents came the first 2 weeks of the trip. So they were there for Dolomites and then 1 week in Chamonix. And then actually Mike McMonigal and Leah Yingling stayed with us for like the whole month leading up to UTMB, which was such a blast. Love those two. And then Tyler's parents came like the 2 weeks before UTMB.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. I love how, yeah, your parents come to the races like Western states too and help out. It's truly a family affair. Well, that's amazing, Rachel. Again, huge congrats. We're going to wrap up here just by transitioning to looking forward to 2024. Oh, wait, the last thing was, hi, Lou. You just requalified for OCC, which I think is maybe more tentative based on med school potentially. Yeah.
By the way, thanks for helping me calculate how to get that qualifier.
Close. I was sweating bullets the
I know, same. Yeah, I'm sure everybody knows about all the UTMB qualification confusion. But yeah, so that's kind of tentative. I think the first half of the year will definitely, yeah, we'll have some ability to be a little bit more focused with the races because I won't start residency until end of June, early July. So we're looking at doing Tarawera possibly. Tyler wants to do Maggiera. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I also kind of want to run Western States, but that's really hard to get into. So
It
we'll
is.
but yeah, depending on residency schedule, I'd like to get back to UTMB.
That's awesome. And so before the end of the year, though, you were planning on going back to the marathon I'm assuming to try to qualify for the trials at CIM.
Yeah, I'm like in the thick of marathon training right now. Yeah, running CIM December 3rd, which is like, is that 4 weeks away? 3 weeks away? 4 weeks? Okay.
4.
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah.
It's going really well. I feel way different than I did the last time I trained for a marathon. Like, I'm gonna just need to move places really quick. Yeah. Okay. So last time I trained for a road marathon, I was feeling like every single week I was going 100% in a workout. Like I was pushing so hard that I was to the point where like, I'm going to need to like drop out of this workout. And I don't feel like that right now. And at first I was like, oh, am I training hard enough? But I think it's actually going to pay off.
Yeah. It's probably just the strength that you've gotten from preparing for OCC, I would imagine.
I think it's that, but also I'm working with a different, like my previous, this is a good hack, just like giving him snacks. I'm working with Elliot Heath, who he coaches like the Bowerman Elite team. And there's a lot of both men and women training for CIM. So just having a group and having someone who's like aware of my situation. And like I told him, I was like, hey, I don't want to run more than like 60 miles a week. And he's like, that's fine. Like we can totally work with that. So previously I was just hopping into whatever my friends were doing, and the coach that was writing their workouts like didn't even know me. So I think it's like a little bit more optimized this time.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see how it goes for you. I love CIM. Have you ever run CIM before?
No, have you?
Oh, yeah, that was where I qualified in 2020, and it's such a cool race because without a doubt you're going to be surrounded by like 20 other women that are also trying to qualify, and I have not found that at any other race.
Cool.
Like at any other marathon. It was so cool.
I can't wait. Yeah, I've heard it's just like magic. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure having you on.
Fun chatting with you guys, and thanks for being okay with Lou hanging out a little bit.
Oh,
Yeah, of course. He's adorable.
We'll have an episode where we're just talking to him and we can babysit him. No, I'm kidding.
I would love it.
Bye, Lou.
Bye, Lou. This has been the Self Help Podcast brought to you by